Can you do a test? Can you go like A to Z?
Yeah, I'm trying it now. I think my audio is now audible. Set up yours.
I can hear you now. Yeah, but good.
But can you hear yourself?
Yeah, I can hear myself. Yeah, great. So a lot of technical challenges. Huh?
I know, right? Twitch is much more simpler.
So welcome. Uh, so yeah, we face a lot of issues. Like this is how we always face. Like the last day we go for production, you know,
Yeah.
all of this, all of a sudden things are going like falling down. It's not working. The testing team is like popping up. Oh yeah, like there was like 100 bugs, and yeah, you guys have to solve it. Like you have like 24 hours.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's better late than never. So I think we should start by introducing us. So I'll introduce myself. Software developer. I have been in this industry for like last 4 years, and I like exploring new stuff. I like building new stuff. There's a new idea that we get through. I will mostly invest, build that at it. Like, I will be only by contribution, contributing a lot of technical parts, and I like doing. So Sahil, can you just
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Sahil Verma. I've been in the industry for three and a half years now as well. After college, and before that, I was working as a freelancer during my time in college. I do majorly work in the back end, and yes, just trying to solve out the few things, and then just trying to share those insights that we have learned over the time with you guys. Yeah.
yeah. So Mohit has asked the question: Are we learning about system design?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes, Mohit. Today's video will be on a system design problem, as we did the last time. That was a lead code one. We will be organizing things much more better from the next time. But yes, today's will be a system design interview problem, and in this time, Gautham will be the interviewer, and then I'll be trying to solve out the question.
yeah. So thing is, I know this guy for a long time, and he has been in this industry. He has been doing a lot of freelance. He has been developing a lot of technology. So this is, I think, one of the best opportunity for me to test out his system design skills. And for that, I would, I have actually thought of his classic question, which I want to see. Like the idea behind this is that the simplest dish that you can make is just an omelet, and how exceedingly well you make an omelet, that how you can actually get the developer. So what I'm expecting from Sahil is to solve this, maybe try to scale it up and see how Sahil actually tackles this problem. So, Sahil, are you familiar with mint.com?
Yes, I am.
So, uh, can you design mint.com?
Sure. So, give me 1 second. I'll start sharing out the screen.
Yeah. So, first, you have to tell me all the things that you know about mint.com. Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. Like Mint.com does provides out. So with Mint, I do understand that it's similar to Walnut, as like most of the Android users might have used it from an Indian-based startup. It's more of like your personal, like it keeps an account of all of your spends that you do monthly or yearly, and I think we are trying to build out the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that I do understand this one would be similar to how Mint or Walnut operates. And in this, we can understand that it will be a handheld device. And majorly, can we expect that it can be a handheld device? So, for example, iOS or Android. And even though we can provide out the generic usage on a website as well, or how are you thinking with that?
Yeah. You can assume it's a high handheld device.
Okay. And in this, I do understand it in a way that we will be holding uh, the daily expenses that the user gets, and those can be when we do talk about it, the expenses that we are getting, I believe for that specific scope, the expenses which are done can be taken through bank servers, and then can be, we can make insight out of it and then can share with our users, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is my understanding. We are creating a personal, like, expense management system, and we are taking the raw data from the bank API servers and then processing it out.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in the terms of maybe taking it a little bit further with the scalability and also with the robustness of the same, I think we can discuss in the further part that how we can take the insights from users messages data, which is like allowed to a certain level in few of the phones, and then can make an insight out of that as well.
We can do that. We can try expanding it further from the functional aspect, and then we'll get into all this.
Sure. So I think I'll be yeah, sure. So we'll start out with the same. So
Yeah.
the first thing that I would like to understand is the scale in which we are initially trying to build it up.
Yeah. So, what do you think would be the scale? Like thousands?
So initially, that I'm thinking that how I'll try to approach this problem would be more of that try to build the initial core of the same. So let's say
Yeah.
that it can handle, say, 10,000 users or something like that, a very basic number, or say 1 lakh, or 100,000 users. And then we can discuss about the specific components where we can face the bottleneck, and then we can scale it out the same.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we can start with, let's say, 100K users, and then afterwards scale to, let's say, even 10 a million, or let's say 10 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The another thing that I do understand with this is uh, initial aspect. So there are like two phases in which I would like to discuss this project. So first phase, and this is through the reading aspect, this will define how much of a read heavy or write heavy my system is. So for the first time, so reading the values from bank servers. And I think in phase 2 we can say that start reading the values from users transaction messages, how walnut does operates. So in both of the cases, when we see that is a user, I believe like this will be a read heavy system as compared to a write heavy system. And that being that read heavy will be because let's say that a user does makes a transaction, okay, and say that these are few of the assumptions that I'm taking. So a user, and you please feel free to interrupt me whenever you feel that I'm not doing it right. So user makes approximately 5 transactions a day.
Okay.
And say that if we are having 5 transactions into 100K, that would be 500 transactions that we do need to take into an account in the maximum load of the first phase that we are discussing. So 500K transactions that we need to check.
Okay.
Now,
so
yeah,
I still have the doubt. Like, why do you actually classify this as a read heavy system? Like, you have
yes,
explained it, but can you explain it a little bit?
yes,
Like,
yes,
elaborate it?
yes. I'm trying to build on the same. So I'll be with you in 1 minute. So
Yeah.
say that this is the initial number of transactions that we are having, and this is the initial number of users that we are starting with. Okay. Can we assume that, okay, with this we have, let's say, a 500K transactions that we do need to take. This is a maximum that I'm thinking that a user can make a transaction. Now when I do usually use an app, it's not that I'm making a string of transactions like every time. So it's more of like, say, if I make 1 or 2 or 3 transactions, I do want to analyze it on the way that it is more of where were my spends. So for example, that if I do started using it out, I want to know what were the patterns in which my spends was done, which sectors I actually made more spends, what was my spend as compared to like this month to the previous months. So I believe those are more requested data, like the amount of data which will be requested in that will be more as compared to a simple transaction input that I'll be having.
Okay. One more doubt.
Yeah.
Is it going to be read heavy because of the user, or like is the app going to read from the bank servers?
Sorry, can you please repeat that again?
So is it going to be a lot of reads from the user? Like the user is going to open up and see all the transaction, or is it going to be from the app side that app is going to read a lot of data? And this
No.
is sorted
Oh, okay. In that, I mean it will be a read heavy from the user side, not from the bank API side.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's more of like we do make transactions as comparatively less, as more of like we get to know what were my transaction. And in few of the cases, let's say that it's almost a month end, and in that time people do become more like how much budget did they have, and how did they overspend it, what were the patterns. And at that time we can expect a lot more read traffic as compared to the write traffic that we are completely expecting.
Okay. Okay. So it's also something which you can't account for the entire month. The load is actually not even.
Yes.
It's going to be much more heavy through certain time of the month.
Yes. So okay. So these were few of the thoughts. That's why I thought that it can be a read heavy system as compared to a write heavy system.
Okay.
Shall I go on with the same assumption, or do you expect me to like consider it as equally read heavy and or a write heavy system?
No, I think the assumption on read heavy system is perfectly valid.
Okay.
So I think you can go ahead.
Read heavy system.
Yeah.
And what I can expect is that there can be periodic load.
Yeah.
That is, for example, each month end we know, or for example, let's say that during the time of certain things when it changes, uh, let's assume for now one of the use case that month end we can have the periodic load, but we can have a burst load as well.
Okay.
Since that is we do this is in just in case that say that something did change. I'm not able to classify it into a complete user use case, but say that there was a change that did happen, and or say a faulty transaction that happened on a bank side or something like that, and everyone wants to see from our app did any of the transaction did go wrong in that. So few of the test cases to have the safety net.
Okay. While we are having this conversation, I
Yeah.
was thinking, like, can you actually tell me what are the functional and non-functional aspects which you are thinking of having with this system?
Yes. So yes, I'm sorry, I should have started with that. So the few of the functional aspects with this should be that the user should be able to go and then see all of the transactions that they have made during a certain period of time. So
Okay.
that can be say that get transaction data, and then we can pass out one of the argument as like from this date to this date they want to get to know that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Another one can be that the category in which they want to know the spends were made.
Okay.
So I think yeah, so get transaction data from time to time in a time block. And then another one, we spend patterns.
Okay.
uh, is there anything other in a functional requirement you think that we should be considering as well?
Did we talk about the budgeting system? Like, we can keep a budget for the users. They know that they're not passing through more
Okay,
than
yeah,
their budget.
yeah, sure, that makes sense. Yeah. So spend budget, yeah, this makes sense. In this we can create out a system, and then that would be working out to send a spend budget that will be having inside the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And another, like, it's not like it is a functional requirement that in the backend for the first phase that we need to connect to the bank APIs.
Yeah.
Okay. For the non functional ones, I think we do know that this should be a highly available system. And so what do I mean by, like, so in comparison to consistent versus available, I think this should be more of an available system as compared to a consistency system. Why do I mean that? Is, for example, when I do have if I made a transaction,
Mm.
and in that transaction if I wish to know that if the transaction was successful or not, my first reaction is to check my message or check my bank app if that thing
Yeah.
did happen or not. And this one is more of a budgeting software that we have. So in this one I do expect that eventually the user will come. So for example, let's say that I went on shopping today, and then I made the few transactions. I don't think so the first use case of our product can be that user just directly wants to know how much did he spend right that way. It's more of like you come home and then you want to know what were the budgets and what were the spends, right? So we can have eventual consistency that, let's say that if I do have a latency of my server gets updated every 15 minutes, that can be acceptable to the user, as compared to that it will be not acceptable that in the times of crash or the high load my system actually crashes down. So I think it should be more available as compared to being consistent at that moment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay.
Let me ask you one thing. Like, what would be the strategy? Like, you are going to like ask a bank every time there is a transaction, or is it going to be like, see, uh, what are the transactions that I have had for today?
Yes. So with that, the way that I'm thinking to design that component can be two ways. So I will be discussing that in detail, but let's say that for the bank transactions core that I'll be having, I can have the polling. So say that I do poll in once in every day if I'm trying to be least consistent, or let's say in 12 hours.
Okay.
Or I can have the but I don't think so that it is more of like from a bank side that they support that, so I do need to make the API calls in that, and I can make these in the same duration of time that I was expecting in polling as well.
Okay.
And yes, to answer your question, it can be in this way. So for example, uh, API call to bank transactions can be expensive, and they can have a certain restriction. So for example, as my number of user grows, I cannot make huge chunks of API calls to the bank transaction, like bank servers, because then it is more that there's a possibility that their servers does gets overloaded. So what I can do is I can take my users, I can have uh, their updates once. So let's say that I took all of the updates today, and then I can store it in my primary database, so that I don't have to go back again and do the things, so changes about them. Because the good thing about transaction is that once it's done, it's done. It doesn't changes, right? We have a transaction on top of it, but that past data doesn't changes.
Okay. So you are telling me that you're going to do the delta storage. Like you are going
Yes.
to take the delta
Yes.
each
Each time,
time.
yeah. Each time take the delta storage, delta change, and then
Yeah.
merge it with your primary database that you're having.
Okay. Okay. Reason. Reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I wanted to actually ask you about the this part. Like, how much detail do you think per user or per transaction happens? Or can you actually tell me the tables that you will be using this?
Sure. Yeah. Just let me write down just the availability and then consistency one, and then
Yeah.
I'll detail out that as well. So highly available, and then eventual consistent, and just with a small point in this one, um, with the same, I I can have an event like a medium level latency, although the first thought will be to reduce the latency more, like
Hmm.
the minimum that we have, better that it is. But I can have a medium latency, which means say that if the user does ask last 6 months of data, my
Yeah.
server can reply in, let's say, 2 seconds, and during that my handheld device can be loading, or say that we are analyzing, and then that can work, which will not have a bad reputation in our product. I believe that is fine, right?
Yeah. So there is this question in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So are you going to query the database for like last 6 months, or like are you going to have something in between just in case?
I think initially how I'm thinking for the small scale, I will be relying on the querying the read replicas. I'll be coming on to those. But eventually, if I can see the patterns as my users grow, I think I can always have a caching system from where I can have the cache. Okay.
Uh, I would like to discuss on that. But first, we'll look into the API calls, like the APIs that you will be exposing, and
Okay.
also the data tables.
Okay. Okay. Sure. So in this, I would like to design the data tables in the following way. And I believe if I design the data tables, I can build the APIs on top with that comparatively easier as compared to API to the data tables. Is that fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So database tables. Initially, when I'm trying to organize it in a single database, this is more of the orientation of data, and I cannot say that this is the final schema in which the production will be happening, because choosing the data type and the databases that we'll be having can be affected by a lot of factors. But initially, I'm thinking more of in a SQL way, and then currently designing it in the same manner.
Yeah, that works.
Sure. So one is that I'll be having the users table.
Yeah.
So this one holds the primary data of the user. Okay. And then the another important one is the transaction table that I have.
Okay.
One can be of budget, and then internal data can be of the bank information. So these
Yeah.
are the few of the datas that I think are primarily which are needed. Yes, these are the primary data which on which my system will be developed, and I think now I can discuss in detail how these things are working. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because users data will be the one that I'll be not just be using it for the core, but for the other things as well. So in this one, let me try to describe all of them one by one. It can have two classes of the data. So one can be, let's say, the login information, which for this interview I'm currently not discussing it. And then I can have the user's primary data, so that can be the personal data of
Yeah.
the user. We'll be discussing that in detail. Then the second one that we do have is the transaction table.
Yeah.
So I can put the users. Okay. Yeah. There would be a slight overlap. So these will be since these data, this data is currently not we are getting directly from the user. Instead, we are getting it from the bank. So I'm keeping it in a complete chunk, because these can be used for a lot of analytics and not just for the API source as well, right?
Okay.
So
For the transaction table, how do you actually link the user table to the transaction table? Because
so
at the end of the day, the user has to get the data, right?
okay. So let's say that the user table that I have, I can have it something as user ID. Okay, and then I can keep it as something as a UID, username. I can have let's say email as well, email and phone number. Now
Yeah.
with the transaction table, I will be needing one more thing, bank information. Let's say for now I'm considering this as a set of information that we will be needing to have a connection with the bank, a transaction with the bank. Okay, so say that if I have their account info, and yeah, I'm black boxing the way a transaction will be happening with the bank servers. So say if I do have their account info, I can make the query. I'm considering that as like one of the decision for now.
I think I can. Do you think that this would be data that you would like to store in your database? Because the thing is, when you actually do something like that, the
It can,
users which are going to like who knows that this details are stored in your database, that's going to cause a problem.
yes.
Can you think of a different way, like you can do something like O or two or some kind of way which you can have
Okay.
a
Yeah. So
token system?
yes. So instead of, let's say, an account information, I can have an API token.
Yes.
So this is completely hash based, and it does include like, so just by having a hash, I cannot actually know which bank and which user I'm trying to match out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. API token as a hash. So in this one, I can now transaction table. I can have the transactions more as yeah. So say that it will be having a transaction ID. Okay, and
Yeah.
it says from and to, and then the information that I get with this. But
Yeah.
the way that I can link this will be that one user can have n number of transactions, right? So I can always add that as a foreign key here. So user ID, I can add it as a foreign key here. So
Okay.
now I
Yeah.
can link, I can link both of those.
Great. That works.
Okay.
So it's a foreign key, and you're going to, whenever you are going to make a query, it's going to be using a join table
Yeah.
or something similar to that.
Yes. Yeah. That depends on the way I'll actually be deciding to organize the database. For example, there would be few places where I think that we would need a more consistency as compared to the other ones. So we can make our decisions more on that.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah. And for another one, that the budget, I can keep the budget inside the users table, but I think budget can be can be defined in different perspectives as well.
Okay,
What
can
do I
you
mean?
elaborate?
So let's say that a budget can be, say, BID, the first one that I have, but and the user ID that I have with this, I can have a monthly budget, and I can say that I want to set up a yearly budget, or let's say that in coming 2-3 months, this is my budget. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Yeah, so you are telling me that there would be a strategy-based budgeting system,
I
right?
mean, yes. So see, it's more of like, I don't want to rigid out the system. It's more that I do want to have a flexibility to the user that they can set their budget according to their will. So I don't
Okay.
want to restrict it just to a monthly budget. If I was having just a monthly budget value, I think I would have put it in the user table. But let's say that if I do want to have a monthly budget, and I have want to have a 6 months or say a yearly budget, I do want to keep that option, and I can have this one always an optional. So if the user does wants to provide me out this data when they're setting the API from the budget API, they can always set it. But if they don't want to, they don't want to.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So I can have that monthly. So these will be the values. Okay. And yeah. And then the bank information that I'll be holding. So these are more of the internal usage.
Yeah.
Formation. And this will be, for example, more of like me knowing the APIs of the bank. Of the banks, and then say that few restrictions. For example, few of the banks says that if you have certain amount of load, you are allowed. So for example, bank says that, you have these many users, we know, we will allow you to have the access or the updates, let's say 1 a.m. to 2 p.m., 1 a.m. to 2 a.m., and that's the time where we are not having their own users load, and they can dedicate that for us. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like I yeah.
But that would actually restrict the, like, that would mean that we'll have to restrict ourselves to the bank.
Oh,
So basically, we have different strategies, right? Like some banks, if we can have a certain conversation, they might willingly put some kind of streaming service so that
yes.
they can give the transaction, and then we will get it in our data.
Okay,
For some,
okay.
we can strategize it according to their timings.
Yes. That's true. So I think by the time we are designing that specific component, I think I'll be able to elaborate more. But this complete set of information that we are having for the bank information, I think it's very discrete as compared to the other information that we are holding. So I think I would like to keep this as a separate table as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I think since we have these, we can have the APIs that we wish to build on top of it.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay. So first one that I think I would like to have is the get transaction data, and in this one I can have the users token, and say from, and then 2. So these are the few of the parameters that I think I should be covering in that. So users token, that would be encrypted and say that it holds the user ID. And one thing that I want to, yeah, this one, a user ID, I explicitly mentioned it as a UUID, so that if I was having, let's say, an increasing integer, if so it can be exposed to the user in some way, and then they can have the internal information about how big of a user's database that we have. So for that reason I chose the decision of UUID. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Can you also mention the verb of, like, is it a get, post?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this can be like one of the main API that we have.
Okay, great.
And this can return me in a JSON format the transactions. So, and in this one, let's say that I can have the data. So there would be a page limit that I wish to include in this. Say that if I did ask for all of the transaction that happened in the last 6 months, I can have a lot of data that would be coming just in one go. So I can have the limit of, say that if I just want to have 10 transactions in just one go, and then have the limit again. Does that make sense?
Uh, yes, sort of. But that will depend on the bank. The bank might give you different kinds of API. They might give you pagination by default.
Oh,
So
yeah, pagination. I meant that term. So in this one, a small detour from the API that I wish to tell you. So
yeah.
the so in this one, the way that I'm understanding it is that this is the API gate that I have. Okay, and
Yeah.
in this, this is my business core, and this is the bank API. So
Yeah.
when a user makes this get transaction data, so I need to make sure that that read is happening directly from here. Most of the times there can be exceptional cases where I do need to make that transaction from the bank service, but
Yeah.
the idea is that when the user asks for this transaction data, I do already have all of those entries, and I just directly return it from here to the user.
Okay.
And in that case, I can have the page limit so that it does not get overloaded with the amount of data that we have.
Okay. So in this, we are deciding that uh, we are going to take the data from our database first, and then
Yes.
maybe
Yes.
the bank. If
Yes.
things,
So
if there are new
the
updates. Yeah.
yeah. Say that in a case that the request did came into my core server, and say, user asked me that give me from 01 Jan to 8th Jan.
Yeah.
So I can know that I have the data of this user till 7th Jan in my system. So I can accumulate all of that. But for the one of the 8th Jan that I don't have, I can make that specific request for the bank server and then return it. So that's why I think we need to also scale it, like make it for a medium latency. In those kind of scenarios, this can happen, right?
Yeah. We can also do something similar to how, like, we can have something intermediate where it will just be a prefix sum or something. This is something that I'm thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a prefix sum for each day, and you just have to just calculate for 8 Jan and just see first Jan and just subtract it.
Yes, yes, yes. So you are specifically talking about like this dash that I've drawn, right? That
Yeah.
how I can know how much of data I actually have in my system, and then how much do I actually need to have. But the bank servers call that we'll be making, I hope to keep them in certain way. So for example, that we don't actually occur this kind of situation when I'm directly getting this API call, because I think that would be not be a very good design. We can have those as an exception case, but directly relying on an external API when my user is asking something would not be a very good design, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and then in this one, I can have my data that can be returned to the user. So data, and then this can be discussed that I can form or return it in complete analyzed data, or I can return it in the way in a semi raw, and then that transaction can be taken place in the Android device. Because let's say that if I do have an Android device, I know it is having the capability to make few of the calculation and analytics on the front end as compared to directly me sending out the complete processed information, right?
Okay. Just one question from Piyush. Would it be better if the user sets their own pagination limit and the limit is handled at the front end uh, side client application?
Yeah, that does. In this one I was taking like 10 as an example of something as of a default limit that I can set. That can be taken, that decision can be taken as one as a default value that I can set. A user can set as well, but I do also need to think of that a user will not directly be thinking that this is the page limit that I want in my Android app so that it can perform better. I believe
Uh,
that is my thinking.
Also, one more thing. Usually, as we see in banks, they do let you set your own limit in the front end, but the thing is, they don't push it beyond a certain limit. So even then, they have to do a lot of joins and all those in the data and somehow get all the data together. And the data size might be so large for certain users that the entire process may take seconds, or it will just lock the database for some time, and then it will give you that data, which is going to be very large. And that is not a very efficient solution most of the time. So they do limit it. And for the front end part, you can actually have uh, set their own limit, but up to a certain extent.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. Also, another thing that I would, and I can be wrong, or it's more of like a decision that needed to be taken. The user is usually, we need to think of who would be the users who will be consuming our data. And me directly thinking that always, so this can be an optional thing that I can give to the user, and every user that will be using this app will not be a tech savvy, or might not be thinking that I need to limit this one to 10 or 15 so that my front end app can work better, I believe that can also be a thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. Piyush, does that solve our doubt? Just put that in the chat. I agree. So yeah, continuing with the API. So
Can I move forward?
yeah,
Okay, okay. Few of the, so this would be one of the primary get API that I can think of. Few of the other ones that I can think of are the post ones. So I can have the post as post as like add bank, add bank, so that you say that I did open another account in specific bank. I can always add that specific value or that specific data. So it'd be having the user's token and the bank ID, and this bank ID will be used, say, the black boxing component of creating out an inbuilt hash inside it, and then take it forward from there. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Another one is that I can have a post of budget setting. So v1, and then set budget. So in this one, I do need to tell that which budget I am setting upon. So it can have, say, budget value that can be monthly or yearly, or any of the scale that we do provide out to the user, and then the value that we hold on top of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And theme, I think, shall I provide out an API of saying that how much budget I have consumed right now? So I think that can be a good option. Shall I do that?
Uh,
Maybe I can tag out the signatures of the API, which can provide out like few of the options that we have for that same.
yeah. Just like interrupting you. These are the APIs which are exposed to the user, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, you will be getting into the APIs which are going to be exposed to the internally and also for the banks, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So another one can be get, and then my get budget, get current budget. Another one can be my category, so it can give me out my spends according to my category. So get data by category. So in this one can be one of the useful API, because it can provide out one of the very necessary feature of telling the user that you have spent this much on lifestyle, groceries, and all those kind of things.
Okay.
I'm thinking that now maybe we can move on towards designing out the components, and then can talk in detail how I'm thinking all of them will talk to each other, and then make the decisions on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
Cool. Sure. So considering this as the user device, we have our first as the load balancer, and with this I can have another layer of the API servers.
Yeah.
Now with this, as we have defined, there can be one of the business unit of this one containing the say users login handles. So this service can add, like, just takes care about that, and currently not discussing that specific service in this. But I can
Okay.
have this is the core service that I can have. So this one does makes the users data processing. So this one is a small scale. We can boil these services down into smaller components as well, and then start working. So this one is users you know, finance data that I have. As compared to like the personal data, this is the finance data that I have processing service.
Yeah.
Another service that we can think of is the handling of the bank databases. So bank APIs handling service. And
Yeah.
when I have these now, I want to keep, say, a load balancer here as well, since we are talking to an external API service. So this can be the bank API. And now we have our databases.
Okay. There's one question. Why
Yeah.
do you have a load balancer with the bank?
So this is like more of a thing that I've learned over time. When you do have a system, it's better that in few of the cases you do keep a load balancer for even the bank servers which are taking place. For example, let's say that if I have an instance of this service, right, and I would be having replicas of the same. So these are replicated, and uh, the way that I'm designing this is that each of the replica that hold can handle any of the transaction that happens. So let's say that if I have three replicas of this service, 1, 2, and 3, and one is the one who made the initial request to the bank API, and when the
Yeah.
bank responded after, let's say, a few delta time, uh, my replica 1 was already overloaded, but I know my replica 3 was fine. So this load balancer can handle that request to here, and I know that I've made my services stateless, so they can handle out the same. So I believe this is my decision why I wish to keep another load balancer while talking to an external API agent.
Okay. So basically, the load balancer is from our side. It's just that the bank is going to hit the load balancer and it's going to
Yes.
uh, do. Okay, I
Yeah.
understand.
It's same as like I can consider this one works as a load balancer because it, in cases, it will be working as my polling or making the server request service as well. So it's a very
Okay.
small and lightweight service which will be required, but it should be having the capability of distribution as a load balancer as well.
Okay. Okay.
Does
So
that? Yeah.
I have one more doubt.
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be a synchronous, like sync call, or is it going to be async?
I think we can discuss upon the same that can be discussed.
Yeah.
I'm thinking just to have the database components here, and then I think then we can come back to that question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I mean from my primary database. So this one is not an in-memory database. This is the permanent database that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also need something as a caching system.
Yeah.
So considering this as the cache, and this is my database system.
Okay. So what kind of cache are we thinking of? Is it going to be Redis?
I think
Is it?
Redis can work in these kind of scenarios pretty well. There were specific use cases. For example, let's say that when we were discussing this specific API, and say we are having a limit of 10, I can always have that data that data will be having a flow from here, to be honest. So the user makes the device request here. It does comes to my API server, which is holding that specific API, redirects it to here. Now I know that this is a read one. Okay, so I'll come to the caching system. So why I've drawn three databases, since it's a read heavy system. So I have my write and my reads happen from these two databases, not from the first one.
Okay.
So user requested 100 transaction and I'm having a limit of 10. So what I will do is I'll make my read that happens from here, and then the caching system will make the read happen from here. When I do have the data, I'm having the 100 values that are present, but from that I take 10 and then return it here, and then I can have the one. So next time when I do wish to have the rest 90 that are needed to be requested, I don't need to read it from the database, and I can just return it from my caching system.
Okay, so cache is like something in between that you're keeping just so that you don't hit the database mode.
Yes, yes.
And
that being,
I'm also assuming that whenever you are updating the cache, like the bank, if I see the flow, the APIs are going to call the bank, and then it's going to get the data and it's going to be put in the database.
Yes, yes. That would be, I make those requests from here. This one does makes it. Say that synchronously or asynchronously, this does returns, and I'll be making the write directly here in the write replica that I have, which in turn updates the values to the read replica that I have, and then follows out the same procedure that we have from in this.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Similarly for these ones as well, these will be having, I think, very few cases in which these two will be talking. So because these have a more of a flow which works in this. Wow. Okay, so this bank API handling service is having more of a flow in this direction and with the write replica, whereas this one will be having a connection here. So a very less connection, or very of the few cases in which we'll be having the interaction between both of those.
Yeah.
Understood. With their internal talking, the way that we have made this is more in a microservices architecture. We can always have we don't need to always keep the interaction between the services as a JSON or something like that. We can always have more of like an RPC call, because those are faster, and there's a very less chance that when we change something in this, so let's say that these two services talk to each other. Instead of me having a JSON API, which is comparatively expensive to parse in the JSON handler, I can have a functional call as an RPC. So it will be more of like this specific service makes a simple function call to this and then gets that complete data, which will be comparatively faster as compared to directly just having the JSON data.
Understood.
Yeah. Okay. Now comes so this is the initial design. The few of the ways in which I think we do need to scale it out would be that we do need to keep the replicas of the API servers. Another way that these services that we do have will be having the replicas, and with having the replica, we need to add to a point where we can make it stateless. So stateless being that any of the requests that I do get from the user can be handled from any of the replicas as from 1 2 3. And since we are having a read flow from the caching service, that can always be handled. So that's my decision on that.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah. Uh, any more questions that you have on this?
I understood. You have explained it to me pretty well.
Okay. Okay. Uh, yeah, that is my design on this, the complete system. Uh, yeah, we can take any of the questions that we have, viewers.
So, I would like to give you a review first. So, basically, when we started exploring about all the functional
Yes.
aspects, and we started getting into a lot of technical details. So, see, the thing is, we have been in a lot of what do you call experience. We got a lot of experience about a lot of topics regarding this. Uh, the thing is, whenever we explain certain things in system design, it's not always about solving the problem. It's about understanding the depth of the user's experience with the solution.
Okay.
So a lot of people might say that, see, this is not how you solve a system design question. They solve it in a different way. People should not be thinking of that. People have different solutions. Some uh, we can see in like a lot of wiki and a lot of places for the single same problem, they have solved it in a different way.
Yes.
So it depends on the experience. Yeah. Also, one more thing that I really admire about the way you have tackled the problems. Like a lot of times when this problem is asked, a lot of people assume that this is always a write-heavy system. But you said this is a read-heavy system, and you took it from the perspective of how this could be a read-heavy system, not just a write-heavy system. Like a lot of places where we see this, they explain why this is a write-heavy system instead of a read-heavy system. But also from a different point of view, you can always see that it can be a read-heavy system, and you can actually see from the perspective of the user, or is it from the app, or is it from the bank. And you have actually explained a lot of things about how the bank server actually gives out the data.
Thank you, Gautam, for that. I think like one of the thing that I would like to discuss with that is, initially I did started talking about the scale. I think I should have started more of the start with the functional and non-functional requirement. Also, but this is like from personal experience as well. You do want to have this session, this interview, as to the way in which the interviewer wants you to go in the specific direction. For example, I had few of the interviews in which they did follow the complete functional, non-functional, the scale, and then APIs, the DB, and then the scale component design. But I had few of the interviews in which they said that, yeah, we do know the initial things. Let's talk about few of the core components and the problems that we'll be having from that, and how would you actually like to solve those. So there is a framework that is usually recommended to follow, but you do need to have more interaction with your interviewer of thinking that how one would like to solve that problem.
Yeah, adding on to that, I actually went into an interview which is very interesting because the thing is, the person did not actually think of like, see, the thing is, the problem that I'm giving it to you, it will take months of research and like see design. It's going to be having like hundreds of components,
That's true.
and if you want to actually solve this problem, this is going to take more than 45 minutes.
That's true. Yeah.
So thing is, we would like to solve the things, but more or less, it's not about solution. It's about how much you know about the each component that you're designing and how well you can maintain those components. if you actually look at one of the sessions that Sahil has done, it talks about monolith versus microservices. And he has described how microservices are easy to maintain. But even in microservices, sometimes people don't design it that well. And sometimes it has to be broken down into more
Yes.
pieces. And that
Yes.
actually costs a lot of money for a company. So if you design it better, like if you think about all these things before jumping into the problem, you would actually be making a lot of progress. It's system design is a topic. It's not about solving the problem, but it's how you solve the problem and how well you can, if you're put in that situation, how well you can scale it up, maintain it, and maybe see how well that one is very close to how in real life they are doing it.
Yes. Even in this discussion that we were having, I believe there were like a lot of places where we can sorry about that, where we can break them down into a lot more of services. Because for example, the core processing unit that I designed, I don't think so that it's a good decision that I can keep all of the analytics and the processing within the same service. I'll be having a complete set of analytics service which will be making all of the data and the analytics on the user's data in certain manner. And those can be working like completely different as compared to the current one that we have.
Yeah, you can use Cassandra, some other database which would be better
Exactly.
suitable for this.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's about solving the like how much in-depth knowledge you have how to
Yes.
solve this
Yes.
problem.
Yes. And same as like, when a specific decision is made, you need to know why you made that specific decision. And that can be derived from a technical and also from a non-technical perspective, right? There can be decision which can be affected by your technical skills, but you do the same time you do need to understand about the user and what your user will be expecting from you, and overall of how you expect your system to behave.
Yeah. So one of the decisions that he took was use SQL database, and like yeah, that is a really good decision. Maybe you might be well off with MongoDB or some Cassandra or something else. But the thing is, at the end of the day, if you can explain why you did that, that more or less nails the interview.
Yes.
And be confident with your answer. The thing is, it's you can actually read about certain system design interview and how you can crack it. But at the end of the day, if those don't come, like it's very rare to actually get a interview question which is outside those small bubble. But when it comes, if you know the actual components for each system, like what component would be better, like is it better to use Redis? Is it better to use RabbitMQ? Is it better to use Kafka? Why would I use Kafka over another like a topic-based streaming versus a queue-based? If I know why which one to use at what point, you more or less have that experience to create that solution. What I have seen is that for certain interviews, they actually pick up like template and then they go with the interview. What the interviewer can do is just throw a small obstacle in between, telling that, yeah, what if I'm not going to be thinking of it as an async method? What if I am going to just call the bank every time I need to get a response? Then what do you do? Then, if in that situation, if you can actually tackle the problem, if you are using the right tools for right uh, problems, then more or less they will be able to understand that you have experience facing such kind of problems and that that is actually very beneficial for the company that you are going to intervene for.
Yes. And do highlight few of the decisions that you're making, right? I think
Yeah,
like, because that gives an insight of how you think, what you think, and it's good for you.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that was there from my side. If you have any questions. Yeah. I think we can leave the stream for now.
Yeah, I think so. Is there any question? I think we can take it up offline also, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
anyone
Do
can
that.
contact us anytime you want to go for a live interview. You're all welcome.
Yeah.
We are here to grow, and we are here to interview. We are here to make that change one step at a time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. See you guys. And if you do have any of the queries or questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah.
Bye bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.